Good evening, good evening. Okay, we're going to attempt to do this in the wonderful outdoors, take advantage of our beautiful weather right now. But nature is always a lot harder to manage, and so we have the sun behind me, and we'll have to see how it works out over here. Okay, but good evening, Dr. Joel, Gail, and David, and Joyce, and Elke, and Leah.
Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. This is really wonderful. We're back at Tanya after quite a little while, between having the baby and that costed us a week or two of learning Tanya. And then Pesach, another 3 weeks. So it's been a little bit rocky. So it's wonderful being back, and God willing, we'll be able to now have a pretty good stretch. Shavuot starts on a Tuesday night, so I think we'll be able to keep everything on track. For sure till July 4th. I don't know. But hopefully we'll be able to be really making some good headway here on learning Tanya. That's the hope. So here we are, and it's so wonderful having you all here. So let us do this. Let's begin. Brand new chapter 29, and chapter 29 is a new issue. It's part of a larger theme, part of a larger collection of chapters. But there's a brand new problem that we're going to be addressing here today. In chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe taught us the principle that in order to be successful, in order to be spiritually successful, in order to have any success in being a Bainani, you have to be happy. There has to be joy. If you're not joyous, you're toast. It's game over from the beginning if you're not happy. It's very simple. If you're happy, then you have the stamina to fight the good fight, and to make tough decisions, and to not falter to weaknesses and all that good stuff. If you're not joyous, if you're not happy, you just won't have the energy. You're so vulnerable. You have zero resistance to anything. So you got to be happy. The mind and heart, the heart especially, has to be open, has to be receptive. You got to have the flow of life flowing through you. You got to be confident. You got to be positive. And the Alter Rebbe is really a radical. Within Jewish thought, the Alter Rebbe is truly radical in how much emphasis he puts on joy. A Jew must be joyous. The worst thing for a Jew is to not be happy. The worst thing for a Jew. Simple as that. So the Alter Rebbe spent considerable time, chapters and multiple issues, going through different forms, different causes for sadness, depression, anxiety, stress, worry, shame, regret, guilt, right? All these types of good stuff. And the Alter Rebbe went through each one specifically, addressed it. We saw if the negative emotion was positive, was it valid, or was it invalid? Was it inappropriate? Was it a wrong negativity? Sometimes when there's a negative experience, it's a good thing, which means it's valid. Sometimes it's not. So we went through all those different variables over there. And that we really wrapped up the problem solving when it comes to joy and sadness and depression. We've done that. Now we have a related but a new problem. A related but new problem. The problem that we're going to begin tackling in chapter 29 has nothing to do with being sad, or with being depressed, or melancholic. The problem we are suffering from over here, the way we're going to call it, is spiritual apathy. Spiritual apathy. Okay, I really see that the sun is really washing me out. We're going to have to wait till hopefully the sun is going to get blocked out by a tree soon. Because right now I can tell that it's really washing out my face. This is the power of the sun. It's eclipsing me, and it's not even in front of me. We've got an eclipse going on over here. But if I do like this, the problem is I could be like this, but then I have to stay in one place the whole time. So I don't think it's worth it. I think I'll just be natural, and it's going to be what it's going to be, right? All right. Today we have a very serious problem. a very serious problem in spiritual growth. Let us begin learning, and you're going to see that the Alter Rebbe addresses this problem like a real professional. First, we're going to see what the problem is, what the symptoms are. Then we're going to diagnose it. Then we're going to offer a solution. And then the Alter Rebbe is going to share with us why the solution is effective. So we're going to be getting the whole overview of the issue, the diagnosis, the solution, and why the solution works. God willing, we'll do it all today. So let us begin. Chapter 29 in your handout, Curing Spiritual Apathy. Part 1, the problem and the solution. Today we'll be learning part 1 of the chapter. Begins the Alter Rebbe. Yet another piece of advice that you, possessing the soul of a Beinoni, must take seriously. All right, so here's a serious problem and a serious discussion that we have to have. Says the Alter Rebbe, you see, there are times, and it could even be quite often, when you will suffer a fossilized heart. Ooh. Your heart becomes fossilized. So a heart is meant to be very soft. A fossilized heart means that the heart just becomes hardened. It dries out. Of course, we're not speaking physiologically, but we're speaking on a figurative level, right? That emotionally of a fossilized heart. Says the Alter Rebbe, it is when your heart becomes hard as rock and spiritually unresponsive. What are the symptoms of this problem? How do you know if you're suffering from a fossilized heart? You will realize that you are suffering from a fossilized heart. We're going to have to also define what this means, the fossilized heart. But there are two primary symptoms where you'll know that you're suffering from this problem. And it is two areas in the life of a Beinoni where you need the heart, you need emotional stamina, you need emotional strength for these two areas of the life of a Beinoni. Says the Alter Rebbe, one symptom is that you find yourself incapable, by any means, of opening yourself to heartfelt prayer, which is the service of the heart. And then there are times when you find yourself incapable of battling your urges to sanctify yourself and that which is permissible to you, due to this cold and burdensome emotional state. Okay, let's speak a little bit about this. This is a very, very unique spiritual problem. You see, we all have hearts, and part of having a heart is that we get excited about stuff. So the human heart could get very excited about a good piece of steak. Right? And also the good piece of steak, whoa, this is so exciting, let's go eat. And the human heart could get excited about going golfing on Sunday. We all, thank God, have healthy hearts. You know, and of course some people are more emotionally inclined, some people are less emotionally passionate, but everybody has an emotional heart, which means that we get moved by things. Either love or fear or excitement or hate or negative. You know, we have emotional movement within us. The Alter Rebbe here is discussing a very specific problem. A guy who generally has a healthy heart. He has no problem getting excited about going golfing on Sunday, but for some reason, try as he may, he cannot get himself excited about anything spiritual and holy and godly and religious. Just simply his heart is unresponsive. His heart is dead and apathetic and indifferent and just simply is shut down whenever it comes to spirituality. So this is not like a mental health problem. And there are some people that in general they suffer that they're emotionally unresponsive. That is not a Tanya problem. For that you got to go see a doctor, go see a psychologist. That's a mental health issue. Here the problem is nothing wrong with your heart. You have a healthy heart. Your heart is emotionally responsive to everything but godliness, to everything but holiness. Now, if somebody doesn't even put in the effort to get excited about holiness and about godliness, then maybe this doesn't feel like such a big problem because it's due to lack of effort. But imagine somebody who really puts in the effort. They're not taking it easy. They wake up in the morning and they daven like a mensch and they're trying to connect with Hashem and they learn Torah and they meditate and they're trying to get themselves emotionally excited. spiritually, emotionally excited. And you know what happens? Nothing. They simply cannot get their heart to react. That's pretty devastating, no? What do you do then? So they're not failing due to lack of effort. If you're failing due to lack of effort, put in more effort. You don't have a problem. Go get to work. Which means, if you want to get excited about Judaism, you gotta work hard. You gotta work hard. You have to meditate. The Alter taught us about this. You have to meditate. You have to really invest daily to filling up your gas tank with good emotional energy, good emotional stamina. If you meditate every single day, you'll be excited about godliness and about Torah and about mitzvahs and about good stuff. Here is a guy, he's doing everything right. He's following all the advice of Tanya. He's meditating, he's thinking the right things, he's doing the right things, but it's not going. And this is what it means having a fossilized heart. That simply one day the Beinoni wakes up and it's just not going. The heart simply stopped reacting. What do you do? The Alter Rebbe says the two immediate symptoms of this problem is going to be that you can't pray. Now, prayer doesn't mean that you open a book and you read words. That's robotic prayer. That's the act of prayer. But real prayer is emotional connection. Prayer is a time where a Jew is supposed to connect to Hashem emotionally. This is what the Alter Rebbe quotes from the Talmud, that prayer is service of the heart. Imagine trying to have a personal, intimate moment with your spouse, with your child. Let's go out for dinner together. Let's have let's really try to connect. And we all know, you can tell in a second, if you're trying to have a heart-to-heart conversation, if you're trying to have an intimate moment, and the other person's not there. They're physically there, they're maybe even talking to you, but the emotional connection is missing. Intimate emotional connection needs emotional connection. That's what davening is. Davening is supposed to be that intimate emotional connection time between a Jew and Hashem. If you've got a fossilized heart, you're going to know it the first time you try davening. There's going to be zero emotional connection happening over here. And that's pretty devastating if you're trying to get emotionally connected, right? So that's number one. And then there's the idea of battling your urges, battling your Yetzer Hara. Sometimes you got to fight the good fight, fight the hard fight. And your Yetzer Hara wants to make certain choices, and you have to give pushback. And some of those decisions are quite difficult, because it can be in the small things. Sometimes the small things are the hardest fights, because the big things, they're easy to say no to. It's big. But the small things, it's so small anyways. It's not even that wrong. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Sanctify yourself in that which is permissible to you. That's even harder than staying away from sin sometimes. Staying away from sin, okay, I'm used to staying away from sin. But making a healthy, good, holy choice when it's not even forbidden, that takes a lot more emotional strength. So the Alter Rebbe says you're going to start seeing the symptoms for this problem is when you see that specifically in the areas of life where you need a lot of emotional strength, that's where you're faltering. This is a problem. What do we do about it? It's a big problem, no? Says the Alter Rebbe. And dear friends, this is heavy stuff. Buckle up over here. Says the Alter Rebbe. Here is the solution. In this case, the Holy Zohar provides the prescribed advice. So here is your prescription. Comes from the Zohar. A short quote. The head of the yeshiva of the Garden of Eden said, all right, this is wonderful. There's yeshivas here on earth. There's also a yeshiva in the Garden of Eden. Isn't that wonderful? One day we'll all meet up there in the yeshiva in the Garden of Eden after 120, right? So lange gesunte Jahren. So there's the head of the yeshiva in the Garden of Eden, and he said like this: if a log doesn't catch fire, it must be broken up, and it will ignite. If a body doesn't give out the fire of its soul, it must be shattered. All right. This is heavy stuff over here. What do you do? We all know this. In order to get a fire going, you need wood. But sometimes you have a fire and you put in a big log of wood, and the wood, instead of helping the fire grow, it ends up smothering the fire. it doesn't take hold of the fire, so all it does is just put a weight. And it totally overpowers the fire. It puts out the fire. So what do? It's a big problem, no? So what do? Break up the piece of wood. Splinter the wood. And if you break it up into smaller pieces, the fire will be able to take hold. Says the Zohar, so too about the body. The body is ideally supposed to help the fire of the soul take hold. A piece of wood is meant to catch fire and help that fire live and grow and give expression. That's exactly what our body is supposed to be doing to our soul. The fire of the soul is supposed to take hold in the body, and then the fire lives and grows and could exude its energy through the body. But sometimes the body, instead of allowing the fire of the soul to express, to take hold, it puts resistance. It smothers the fire of the soul. Says the Zohar, we got to break up the body. You got to break up the wood, you got to break the body. Now, what does this mean? Now, God forbid to think that what it means is take a sledgehammer and start beating up your body, right? God forbid. It's, of course, on a figurative level. So, dear friends, we have here 3 short lines from the Zohar. And in typical fashion of Kabbalah, everything is very short, everything is very cryptic. So we have a lot of unpacking to do. But right here in this short text, we have both the solution, we also have the diagnosis. The author is going to explain this to us. Top of page 214. The meaning of the Zohar's phrase, a body doesn't give out the fire of its soul, is like this, is that the light of the soul and the mind do not shine brightly enough to overcome your body's materialistic urges and fixation. What's happening here? The fire of the soul, and the way the fire of the soul spreads through the body is through the mind. It's being stopped. And the body's materialism, and the body's materialistic fixation, and it naturally gravitates to materialism, and it's very base, the body's urges. It can't penetrate that. It can't influence that. What's happening here? Says the Alter Rebbe, you understand God's greatness, and your mind contemplates it. You're putting in the effort, but it just doesn't catch and stick in your brain enough to let you overcome the coarse materiality of your heart. It's just not working. It doesn't change you. It doesn't move you. You are spiritually apathetic. You are spiritually uninspired. You're spiritually unmoved. And you're trying, you just can't get yourself inspired. You can't get your heart to be moved and to become better and to be... There's no warmth. There's no warmth of your soul hitting your heart. Says the Alter Rebbe, the mind and the heart are just too coarse and crude. That's what's happening over here. Now, why does this happen? How does this happen? Why does it happen that all of a sudden, one day, you could be a very successful Bainani. Yesterday, you were able to get yourself emotionally excited, emotionally moved. Today, you can't. Why is this happening? Says the Alter Rebbe, what is causing this? How is this happening? It is the crudeness of the klipa within you. We all have klipa inside of us. Our animal soul has klipa. What's klipa? Klipa is the ego and the sense of separation from godliness and the very self-centeredness. That's all klipa. And we feed that klipa, right? Our animal soul is fed very well. And when you feed the animal, when you feed the beast gets bigger. So we all have klipa. And sometimes the klipa just becomes so crude, so thick, and the ego gets so big. You become so arrogant. You become so full of yourself. You become so smug. And what happens, says the Alter Rebbe, it lifts itself over the light of the holiness of your godly soul, obscuring and dimming its brightness. What happens is the klipa gets so powerful and lifts itself to such high levels that it starts putting stiff resistance, and it starts obscuring and dimming the light of your soul. And boy, oh boy, that's dangerous. You know, in medicine, Joel, maybe you can help me out over here, right? Everybody has stuff in our bodies. Sugar levels, and this levels, and that levels. Everything is good. Blood pressure levels. But everything has to have a range, healthy numbers, right? You don't want anything having too high levels. If anything is too high, then it starts hijacking the body, and it starts setting off all these other things that go out of whack. Everything is in a good balance. When things are balanced, when things are at the right numbers, it's good. So too, you know, we all have klipa inside of us, and because we possess the souls of Bain in him, we're always going to have klipa inside of us. But there's a healthy level of klipa. Here, what's causing this problem is that your klipa numbers are just getting so high that it is hijacking healthy spiritual functionality. Now, what makes the klipa become so arrogant and become so dominant and so assertive? It is a sense of internal smugness and arrogance, and you just feel so good and full of yourself. And when that happens, you become just very self-centered. And when that happens, you become very spiritually desensitized. And, you know, I don't want to talk about other people. Let's just talk about ourselves. I think we do know that happens sometimes. That when life is just so good and we're successful and things are doing good, we start getting just so full of ourselves. And that ego starts hijacking our spiritual sensitivity. When the klipa numbers go high, when the klipa is allowed to become so dominant, it hurts the ability of our godly soul to penetrate and to allow that fire and the energy and the warmth of the soul to take hold within ourselves. So here we have the problem. The klipa just got so thick and so full of itself and so crass that that's it. Now you as a person are not being receptive anymore to the energy of your godly soul. So we now know what the problem is. The problem is that you got klipa of your animal soul, and it's just getting so thick and so full of itself and so arrogant, and it's lifting itself up, and it's just totally stopping the flow of energy from your godly soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, that is why you need to shatter that klipa and raise it down to the ground. The ego, the arrogance, the smugness, the inner pride has just gotten so strong to the point that it's stopping healthy spiritual functionality. Let's break down that klipa. Let's bring down those numbers. Let's bring it down to a baseline level again. Bring it down to the ground. How do you do this? How do you shatter the klipa? How do you do this? Says the Alter Rebbe, and this is a tough prescription here. Right? The Alter Rebbe is a spiritual doctor. Sometimes doctors tell you to do something, you're like, oh, sure, I'm happy to do that. Sometimes doctor tells you that we need to do something, and you don't like hearing that. I don't like doing that. So you got to do it. Sometimes for health, you got to do things which are not so pleasant. Says the Alter Rebbe, how do you do this? How do you break the klipa inside of you? You do this by setting times to deflate your ego. As the verse says, to be despised and disdained in your own eyes. You got to find time to meditate on things that don't necessarily make you feel so comfortable. And things that, when you meditate on them, it will start really popping and bursting the bubble of your ego. And the arrogance and the sense of pride and smugness that we all love feeling will all of a sudden become deflated. To the point that you start having an inner sense of, I'm despised, and I'm disdained. I'm even ashamed of what my life looks like. I'm ashamed at what's going on. That's tough pills to swallow, right? But the Alter Rebbe says you got to do that. That is how you break the Sitra Achra. That's how you break the klipa. You want to break the klipa, you got to feel crushed. You got to feel that crushed. And says the Alter Rebbe, and when you experience a broken heart, when you got a broken heart, this causes a broken spirit, referring to the spirit of Sitra Achra. You want to break the animal soul inside of you, You got to feel that brokenness within yourself. Okay, so before we go on, let's unpack this a little bit together, because I want to say a few points. Nobody in Judaism speaks about the importance of always being happy and always being positive as much as the Alter Rebbe. So this could seem a little bit like a shocking departure from that messaging. Yeah, Dr. Joel, don't worry, we're just at the beginning of the chapter. We're just beginning, so we still have a lot. Don't worry. So we're going to get examples. We're going to have a lot of stuff over here. So, but generally, the Alter Rebbe wants us to be happy. And all of a sudden over here, the Alter Rebbe is telling us to be very tough on ourselves and to break the ego, and we should feel despised and disdained in our own eyes. What's going on over here? Is a Jew meant to feel good about themselves? Should a Jew always feel inept, like what we're saying over here? And the answer is that, listen, a Jew has to always be happy. Sometimes there could be big problems. And when you have big problems, you go to a doctor. And sometimes the doctor is going to tell you, well, we're going to have to do a certain procedure. And the procedure is dangerous, and we don't do this regularly, right? You don't do procedures every single day. Procedures are something you have to do at a special opportunity, under special care, in the right time, in the right place, in the right environment. And then a procedure, which is usually a dangerous thing to do, if done under the right conditions, it's a good thing. It will help you. We have to see this chapter as a unique situation. This is this is not normative behavior that a Jew should feel broken. Normative behavior is that a Jew has to feel happy and positive and confident. But every now and then, you have to have the right care. You have to have the right advice. The Alter Rebbe also said that in order to implement the teachings of Tanya, somebody has to have a rabbi. Somebody has to have a mentor. Tanya is not you can't run off with Tanya on your own. Tanya has to be taught by somebody. You need somebody's help to implement it, a chassid, an elder chassid to help you out. But the Alter Rebbe is saying sometimes it's what we have to do. You got to experience that brokenness. And even though the brokenness could deflate your ego and make you feel bad, and that's not healthy for a Jew. We don't want Jews feeling bad, because when a Jew feels bad, you're inviting all these bad stuff into your life. And there's all these risks and vulnerabilities when you're not feeling good. But in the right opportunity, it could be very, very helpful. How does it help? In landscaping, there's sometimes a problem that you could have, in your yard, you have dirt, and the grass is starting to thin out. You start getting these dry patches. The grass isn't growing. And you could try seeding the lawn, and you could try watering it, and it rains, but nothing's doing. So sometimes what the problem is, and the way to fix the problem, maybe one of you could help me out with the pronunciation of this. I don't know how to pronounce it. Aeration. You come with a machine, or sometimes you could do you could buy shoes, and you have to make holes. You have to perforate holes within
aeration.
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 Aeration. E-ration.
E-R-A-T-I-O-N.
All right, whatever. That's what it is. Yeah, but that's what it is, right? You got to make a lot of holes. You got to poke a bunch of holes within your lawn. Now, what does that help? What's going on over here? What happens is the lawn, the earth, the dirt of your lawn becomes so compact that it becomes so stiff that when you put seeds on the lawn, the seeds never go. It doesn't absorb the seeds. And when it rains, the rain just bounces off the dirt. It doesn't enter into the dirt. So you say, I got to break up the dirt, make holes, allow air to enter, soften it up a little bit, make it receptive, and then growth could happen again. Sometimes that happens with our souls as well. Souls have to be receptive. Hearts. Hearts have to be receptive. A Jewish heart has to be receptive. Sometimes the heart just gets so full of itself and so much arrogance, which comes from the klipa. It becomes just so thick that all of a sudden just nothing could penetrate. And you then suffer from a fossilized heart, from an apathetic heart. And spirituality just simply is locked out of your heart. You got to poke some holes in there. When you poke some holes in there, you're not breaking your heart. You are breaking the heart. But what you're actually doing is you're allowing your heart to become soft and receptive again. And that's spiritual health. So usually you don't want to break your heart. Usually you also don't want to be making holes in your lawn. But if it gets too stiff, breaking it is actually fixing it. Right? Break that soil, break it down, soften it up. We got to do that with the heart too. A broken heart. Got to break the heart. Heavy stuff here, no? So don't worry. We still have to understand how to do this, how to implement it. We still have a way to go, but we're getting this idea. And I'll just share like this. I want you to think back at a time in your life, and you really see this sometimes. Sometimes God breaks our heart, right? Sometimes life is going good, but then all of a sudden one day, boom, God throws us a lemon or a few lemons, and our chips are down, right? Something gives us a real reality check, right? Life was going good, and we were all smug, and we were riding on cloud nine, and one day all of a sudden you've got this problem and that problem. And sometimes what happens is we become a lot more spiritually sensitive when we are in a more vulnerable place. Sometimes when there are people who are just so successful and life is just so good, they become so spiritually out of touch. They figuratively become so fat. They become so full of themselves, to the point that anything a little bit more sensitive, spirituality, values in life, priorities in life, these things just get lost on them because they're so successful and everything is they're lucky go, right there. Then all of a sudden we go through a rough patch, we get a little bit broken, and you see when people go through a rough time, they start thinking about life differently. What are my priorities in life? Maybe I should make place for spirituality, for godliness, for mitzvahs, for davening. It's very interesting. When the chips are down, sometimes that helps us become more spiritually sensitive. Now we have the diagnosis of why that happens. Because when things are so good, it allows our animal soul to just become so full of itself. And it emboldens the animal soul, to the point that the animal soul starts becoming so strong that it eclipses the energy of the godly soul. When the animal soul and when the klipa gets all of a sudden a little bit of resistance and it breaks it a little bit and you poke some holes in it, all of a sudden the animal soul is not emboldened anymore. It's not so sure of itself anymore. And all of a sudden the energy of the godly soul starts seeping in a little bit more. And indeed, sometimes it's one of the reasons why Hashem gives us difficult times. Difficult times breaks our heart, and sometimes it's spiritually healthy. It's very interesting, right? It could be spiritually healthy to go through a little bit of time where we're a little bit broken. And it shakes us up, it shakes us out of our complacency. And it helps us reconfigure life. And then afterwards, Hashem helps us out. We're able to overcome the difficult times, and indeed, very often, we take the new spiritual clarity that we have in life, and we're able to carry it with us into the good days. What the Alter is saying is, you don't have to wait for God to do that. Do it to yourself. When you feel on your own that you're going through a spiritually dark time, and that your heart is becoming unresponsive, break yourself. You don't need God to do it for you. Poke some holes in your own heart. And when you poke some holes in your own heart, that's a healthy heart. You don't want a heart that is so arrogant, that is so full of itself, that it locked itself out of anything beyond anything higher, and it just became so self-obsessed and so self-absorbed. You want a heart that's a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more broken into, and a heart that could take in the energy and the light and the influence of the godly soul. There's a line from the Chabad Rebbes. There is nothing. Listen to this very deep line, and I wonder if any of you ever heard this line before. There is nothing more whole than a broken heart. You ever hear that before? There is nothing more whole than a broken heart. A whole heart is trouble. A whole heart is not good, not healthy. A broken heart is a good place to be. And as much as Chassidus wants us to be joyful, it could sound like a paradox, but it's not. The joy itself comes with a broken heart. What does a broken heart mean? We'll have to see. But the idea of having that inner brokenness, of feeling the lack within our spiritual lives, is very, very important. And it's one of the key ingredients of spiritual health. So this is going to be an idea where this is a brand new concept in Tanya. And I'll be honest with you, this chapter is one of the chapters of Tanya that I struggled with. I struggled with tremendously for years, and I probably still do, because its messaging is very. I don't know. It demanded me to think through this idea so deeply, and it's one of those times where the Alter Rebbe teaches us a new concept, which forces us to rethink life and to work hard to take in a new perspective. But here we have the idea. The problem is spiritual apathy. Why is it happening? Because our animal soul and the klipa of our animal soul is simply so arrogant and so crass and coarse and crude that it's just asserting itself. It's emboldened to eclipse and obscure the presence of the godly soul in your life. What is the solution? You got to break it down. How do you break it down? You have to feel broken. So before the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us how to do this practically, we have a very important question here. I want you to think about it. We have an animal soul. We have to break that animal soul in order to restore spiritual health, in order to overcome this fossilized heart condition. How do you do it, says the Alter Rebbe? You got to break yourself. 1 second. Why do I have to feel broken? My animal soul needs to feel broken, not me. The klipa needs to get broken, not me. But here the Alter Rebbe says, no. A broken heart causes a broken spirit. You want to break the klipa? You want to break the sitra achra? You got to be broken-hearted yourself. So the Alter is going to ask a very simple question. Why do you have to be broken-hearted? Why does it have to be you? Why can't we just break the klipa itself? Why does it have to be personal? You understand the question a little bit? Let's read. Bottom of page 214. Says the Alter Rebbe, this leaves us with a question. If the goal is to break the spirit of sitra achra, then why does the ego-crushing experience have to be directed at yourself and at your own heart? Why can't we theoretically break the klipa without me having to be a casualty of this crushing experience? And in order to answer this question, in order to help us understand the mechanics of why does it work to feel broken, and how does feeling broken on a personal level restore spiritual health, Alter is going to explain to us a little bit like this. Let's read a little bit. Before we read, I want to ask you a question. The Alter is going to teach us a very important fundamental idea in Tanya. We have two souls, the animal soul and the godly soul. Now I want to ask you a question, and I want you to give me an honest response. You ready? Which soul would you say is the soul that defines you? Which soul defines your self-concept? Your day-to-day conscious experience of you. When you feel yourself. Which soul is that? Feel free to unmute. Is it your animal soul or is it your godly soul? What do you say?
It's your animal soul.
Joel says the animal soul. Why do you say the animal soul?
Well, because it controls me most of the time.
Because meaning the default you
Yeah.
It's the animal
It's
soul.
hard, it's very hard to break from it because when you feel you're in such a position that you don't want to trying to think of the word to say it's you and it makes you feel like you're not you if you don't get rid of that you don't get rid of that soul. It makes you feel less spiritual,
Yeah,
less
exactly.
less
We feel
less,
that.
less good,
Do
less,
we
less
concur? Do we concur with Joel or any dissenting voices? What do you say? Who is the default you? The animal soul or the godly soul? So Joel says it's the animal soul. Anybody disagree with that experience?
I say it's the godly soul because, I mean, what Dr. Lieb said, that was really, I agree with that too, but I feel I'm more than my basic needs like hunger or wants, or that's not really you. That is only what you want or need, but you should be more than the sum of that.
Oh, you should be more. And we are more, right? We do have
I hope I would be more. I would
Oh.
hope that I'm more than
we all hope we're more. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, you wake up in the morning, you go to sleep at night, you run your life. Which soul is defining
defining.
you? Who's the default you? Who's operating you? Which soul is your default operating system?
The spiritual soul.
You say the spiritual soul?
Yeah.
Which means when you wake up in the morning, do you feel your spiritual soul pulling you or do you feel your animal soul pulling you?
Spiritual.
You say spiritual.
Yeah, I agree with her. I agree.
Let me ask like this. What feels more natural? And what feels more of an imposition? To eat breakfast or to go daven in the morning? What feels more like you and what feels more like something that you need to make an effort to go do?
Well, I daven in the morning before.
No. I didn't ask you what you do. I said which one feels more naturally you and which one feels...
That's what makes me feel more natural. That's what I do. That's my first thing that I do.
You feel the need to daven more than you feel the need to go eat breakfast?
Yes.
Wow. Now, if you daven regularly, then maybe that's a bad question. But let's say a mitzvah that's harder to do. You really think that you are more of a godly soul than an animal soul?
In most ways, I think yes.
Really? You
Yes.
feel the impulse of do you feel that you need to convince yourself and push yourself to go eat breakfast?
It doesn't make much difference to me mostly until I
But
get.
but if you're hungry, which means I understand everybody feels good with spiritual experiences, but which one comes more naturally and which one do you have to make a concerted effort to make time for, to clear space for mentally?
Well, I make time. That my first thing of the day is to make time.
Again. I'm not talking about what you put in an effort to, but what comes more naturally to your psyche? Your animal soul's impulse or your godly soul's impulse?
If I may, Rabbi Dubov,
Sure.
I think that most of the time my godly soul is a little bit stronger than my animal soul. But
Okay, that's a good way.
in order to daven, we're supposed to take care of our bodies first and eat first to give us the energy.
Right, but again, I'm not talking about ideals over here. I'm asking a very personal experience. Which soul has the first voice in your operating system, and which soul do you have to make more effort to make space for?
The animal soul has the first. I mean, things that come easy.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm Hillary. Everybody's making me feel so inept over here.
Of course.
Everybody's making me feel so inadequate because I would answer, if I'm going to be real with myself, that my animal soul dominates myself.
Yeah.
Is it only us? Maybe everybody else is a tzaddik over here.
No, I think. I mean,
Listen.
I think even if say you're studying, you have to study for a big exam. It's like, it's the last thing you want to do, right? You want to do everything else. You want to do things that are pleasurable and
Yeah.
You
Let's
have to-
put it this way. Gail and Elke. What is easier to skip by mistake? A Tanya class or dinner? Which one would you be like in bed and like, wow, I forgot to eat lunch and dinner today? Or, wow, there was a Tanya class today. I totally forgot about it. Which one's easier to happen?
I had a chance to go listen to
No. I don't want to hear stories. Which one is more susceptible to happen? That you by mistake missed a Torah class that day, or you by mistake missed eating that day? I forgot to eat. What can I do? I happened to not eat today. Which one is more susceptible to happen?
Mistake the Torah class.
To miss the Torah class, right?
Yeah. Yes.
What does that tell you?
That my animal soul is in charge.
Your animal soul has more of a presence on your default operating system. Now, I can't discredit somebody who says opposite. But if you're the opposite, you're a tzaddik.
Oh my
Now,
God.
if you're not a tzaddik, then either you don't understand my question enough, or you got to do a little bit more soul searching.
No, I
But let me tell you a fact about life. If you are a normal human being, your animal soul dominated your life from the moment that you were born. When you were born, you cried not because you had a godly soul, but because you have an animal soul that was uncomfortable and hungry. And when you were 2 years old, you pulled toys away from kids and you were jealous and you fought with other kids because you had an animal soul that was jealous. And when you're 25 years old, you had a desire to go get yourself a fancy car because you have an animal soul that likes nice cars. And it doesn't matter what age you are, a Bainani is defined by their animal soul. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't have godly souls. And it doesn't mean that we don't make priority for our godly souls. Of course we do. But no matter how successful you are living a Bainani life, and no matter how successful you are at giving attention to your godly soul, we can't deny the fact that the conscious self is an animal soul. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Gail still doesn't agree. Okay, listen, I can't disagree with your experience, but I am.
No, I think I get it. But you wake up in the morning and you are hungry, and there's nothing you can do about it except eat. But you are not defined by that hunger. Is that really?
You're not
who you
defined by that
are?
hunger, but which soul has the louder voice within your consciousness? Which soul has a greater hold on your consciousness?
At this point in my life, not eating is not my first priority when I wake up.
Yeah,
Which means like this.
it's choice.
Anger, in chapter 1 of Tanya, the author told us that anger comes from the animal soul.
Yes.
So do you feel that your emotion of anger has to fight against your animal soul to try to be angry? Or does your
No.
godly soul have to fight against your anger to try to not be angry?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that
It's
makes
the latter?
sense.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the human race.
Okay,
That is the
yeah.
condition of life, right? Are we now on the same page?
Yeah, now I get it.
Which soul dominates you? I could go by a day and I forgot to study Torah that day. I was supposed to learn something, I didn't do it. I'm telling you for a fact, I will never get into bed and a half hour later realize, oi, I totally forgot to eat today. Never happened in my life. I just happened to forget. I was hungry. I just didn't realize I was hungry. That never happened to me. My animal soul wants to eat. That is me. Oh, learning Torah, making time to pray. I got to think, am I in a good mood? Am I in a bad mood? Do I like God today? Am I upset at God today? Did my rabbi make me, gave me the wrong look yesterday? So I decided I'm not showing up to shul for another 6 months. Your godly soul is trying to assert itself. But your animal soul is right there. He's in the driver's seat. He's at the control panel. The Alter Rebbe says, you cannot separate the the animal soul from the default you. Now, we still have a godly soul, and the godly soul is the truest part of who we are, but it's not on a revealed level. At the core, the deepest true of you is the godly soul. But on a conscious level, on an operating level, the you, the self, is the animal soul. And sometimes, we're so used to hearing, especially those who learn Chassidus, that the godly soul is the real you. And it's true. But we also have to realize that there's another side to that coin. That on a conscious level, your life is defined and you are dragged. The one who's running your life is the animal soul. Life, human life, is synonymous with the animal soul. It takes a concerted effort of the person, of the Jew, to make space and to allow the godly soul to have more presence in their life. But it takes effort. And it's a lifelong effort. And you'll never change that balance of power. You'll never kick out your animal soul from the driver's seat. Oh, and now the godly soul's in the driver's seat. And now we'll forget to eat for a week just because, my godly soul is not interested in eating. That doesn't happen. If you are a regular human being, the animal soul has the driver's seat and never relinquishes that driver's seat. And we try to squeeze in and push in the influence of the godly soul. But it's always an uphill battle. So the Alter Rebbe says, let's get back to the plot. The Alter Rebbe says, you want to break your animal soul? That is breaking yourself. You can't isolate you from your animal soul. You are your animal soul. That's life. So if we're going to break the animal soul, you're going to feel that very acutely. That's the idea the Alter Rebbe says. Let's read. Top of page 215. Whew. How are we doing? This is a lot more colorful conversation than we're used to. We should do this more often. This is the real way to learn Torah. That there's give and take, and we argue, and we flesh out the ideas. Okay, top of page 215. This is because in a Beinoni, right? In the Beinoni, which means regular in the regular humanity, this Sitra Achra is the very person himself. You are your Sitra Achra. You are experiencing your Sitra Achra. Why? For the life-giving animal soul that runs the body is as firmly entrenched in a Beinoni's heart as the day he was born. When you are born, when you look at a baby, you are seeing a brute, uninhibited animal soul. And that animal soul never left its place of control of your life, just like when you were a baby. The only thing is that we're a little bit better at masking, at hiding the inappropriateness of our animal soul. Babies don't know how to hide it. It's just, the animal soul just comes out unfiltered. But essentially nothing changed. The same way the animal soul dominates the life of a baby, the animal soul dominates our life as an adult. So therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, it follows that this soul's consciousness is his principal identity, is your principal identity. Your principal conscious identity is the animal soul. What about the godly soul? We have a godly soul, but the relationship that we have with our godly soul is a degree removed. Says the Alter Rebbe, let's continue reading, regarding the godly soul on the other hand. What do we say about the godly soul? This is part of the morning prayers. We thank Hashem in the morning, and we say, the soul that you have placed within me, she is pure. That's part of the morning prayers. The soul you have placed within me, she is pure. Says the Alter Rebbe, the text is precise in saying, placed within me. It's not me, it's within me. Implying that myself is not the consciousness of the pure soul. We do possess a godly soul, but we can't say that the default you is your godly soul. The default self, the consciousness of self, is the self of the animal soul, not the self of the godly soul. We feel removed a little bit from our godly soul. There's me, and then I have a godly soul. We don't feel removed from our animal soul. My life is the animal soul's life. It's synonymous. Now, the Alter says something very interesting. But that is only the case with tzaddikim. Which means only tzaddikim, it's the opposite. Says the Alter, but with them, this situation is the reverse. The pure soul, meaning the godly soul, is the person himself. And the body self is referred to as the body of a person. By a tzaddik, it's the exact opposite. A tzaddik wakes up in the morning, they feel their godly soul. The animal soul and the animal soul's shtick and impulses and drives is like secondary to them. But they are a walking, talking, breathing, feeling godly soul. So just like by us, we shut down when we're hungry. People, oh, I'm hungry, I gotta go eat lunch. It's amazing how just a little bit of hunger after a few hours of eating food has such power over our lives. Oh, I can't function today. I'm in a bad mood. I'm hangry, right? You know about hangry? A tzaddik is the exact opposite. They, by default, subconsciously, they are living their godly soul's life. Oh, the animal soul. Yeah, they have to be reminded that they have an animal soul. They have to listen into what the animal soul wants. It's like, the same way we have to make a concerted effort to try to make space within our lives for the godly soul. That's what a tzaddik has to do with the animal soul. It's the exact opposite. Which is pretty amazing, right? It just shows you that a tzaddik is not like a better version of me. A tzaddik is a whole different life. When you read this piece of Tanya, you realize that we don't even understand what a tzaddik is, how holy a tzaddik is. A tzaddik is not an animal soul. They don't have jealousy. They're not materialistic. They're not crass like we are. Because we have an animal soul at our dashboard. They have a godly soul. They're living life as a godly soul. Says the Alter Rebbe, a very interesting episode, very interesting anecdote. That's why Hillel the elder, the great sage Hillel, we all love Hillel, when he was going to eat, he would tell his students that he was going to perform an act of kindness to a poor, miserable being, referring to his body. Can you imagine? When we go to eat a meal, we're eating. When Hillel went to eat a meal, he wasn't eating. Oh, nebuch, right? You know what nebuch means in Yiddish, right? Poor thing. My body is begging for food. I'm going to go do a favor for my body and for my animal soul and feed it some food. It's like you feel nebuch, let me go take a little bit of care of my godly soul. That's how you felt about eating lunch. Explains the Alter Rebbe, he saw his body as a separate entity from himself, not his core identity, to the point that he would say that he was doing kindness to it by feeding it. Him and his body, him and his animal soul, there was like a degree of separation. That's not me. For he himself was only the godly soul alone, since that alone was the active force vitalizing his whole self and body. Who is he? He is a godly soul. But that's only by tzaddikim. Oh, now the author explains, tzaddikim do possess a life-giving animal soul. Right? This doesn't mean that a tzaddik doesn't have an animal soul. They do have an animal soul. And the soul that is invested within their blood and flesh. So they do have an animal soul as well. However, the negative energy within that soul has been transformed into a positive force and integrated into the actual holiness of the godly soul. So they have an animal soul, but the animal soul has been totally rehabilitated. It was stripped of anything negative. And the animal soul now simply becomes an agent of the godly soul. But the godly soul is the core identity of the tzaddik. But, concludes the Alter Rebbe, but within the Beinoni, however, the core essence of the life-giving animal soul of Sitra Achra, that is invested in your blood and flesh, has not been transformed to good. And if so, that is what defines the self of the person. So we are the animal soul, and for that reason, when we need to crush the animal soul, it's going to become deeply personal. We're crushing ourselves. Our own heart's going to be crushed. So says the Alter Rebbe, here we have the very introduction to this problem. We introduced the problem, we've diagnosed the problem, we've given the solution, and we explained a little bit why the solution works. The problem is a fossilized heart, which creates spiritual apathy. Your heart simply becomes totally unresponsive to holiness. Why is that happening? Because the klipa of your animal soul has risen to such dangerous levels, risen to such dangerous numbers, that it now obscures and fights and resists the energy of the animal soul. Therefore, what do we have to do? We have to break it down. The way to break it down is we have to feel that brokenness in our own heart. And the reason why we have to feel it on a personal level is because we are our animal soul. That's it. That's what we learned today. Heavy opening of a chapter. It's a big chapter. It's going to take us another 2 classes to go through this chapter. Next class, in the rest of the chapter, we're going to learn the specific meditations, how to reach a broken heart, if necessary. But here we got the theory. Now that we have theory, we can now implement it next week's chapter. And dear friends, it's 8:33. With that, we conclude tonight's Tanya class. Thank you for joining. This was wonderful. And we'll see you all soon. Wishing you all a wonderful evening.